Now, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff from California, ranking member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Congressman, let me start with your thoughts, since we just saw retired General Mattis there, about the choice of Mattis.
Well, I think he's a good choice in the sense that there's a lot to like about this man. He served with great distinction for many years in the armed forces. He's pushed back already against the president-elect on the issue of torture, saying that it's a bad idea and it's not effective. I think he will also speak plainly to the president-elect as well as his national security advisor nominee about Russia and how Russia is not our friend. I think he speak strongly about the NATO alliance and the need to support our NATO allies, in particular in the Baltics, but elsewhere. I think in Syria he will push back against working with the Russians who don't share our interests and have been bombing civilians there. So there's a lot to like about this man. There are reservations about breaching this long-standing policy, in fact, embodied in law, that we don't appoint people as Secretary of Defense unless they've been out of uniform for many years. 7 years is the current law. Chris, there's a recent report that they may try to insert in a must-pass government spending bill a waiver for General Mattis. I think that would be a big mistake.
I saw them. They may try to put that in the continuing resolution, which is must-pass to keep the government open. You mentioned him as a sort of counterweight to Michael Flynn. A lot of people have been talking about this, and I want to talk about Flynn because it's really quite extraordinary. I mean, Michael Flynn's son had a transition.gov email address. He was, according to reports, the transition had sought security clearance for him. He was acting as a chief of staff for his father. And after a gunman shows up at a pizzeria in Washington, D.C., based on an entirely false, libelous conspiracy theory that there's a child sex ring being run by the Clintons after this guy shows up with a gun, Michael Flynn's son, his chief of staff on the transition team, reportedly seeking security clearance, says you have to disprove it before we know it's false. He was then let go today. What does that say about Michael Flynn's judgment?
Well, you know, it causes profound questions, I think, about the judgment of both father and son, because both have been involved in the propagation of these fake news stories. And there's no question that they're completely fake and false. It's not as if the earlier tweets by Mike Flynn Sr. about the Clintons' involvement in a child sex ring was any more true than the latest his son, and the fact that they would peddle these fake news stories, whether it's during the campaign or after, doesn't matter. I mean, it's completely unethical, and you really have to question both the morals and the judgment of people that would be engaged in propounding such ridiculous and absurd conspiracy theories, which could have had very deadly consequences. You know,
there's a debate happening right now, some back and forth about Keith Ellison, a congressman from Minneapolis, one of your colleagues, chair of the DNC. There's some writings he's had in the past that some have said they're uncomfortable with in terms of his views on Israel and Zionism and things like that. I want to show you a tweet that Michael Flynn himself posted. It was later deleted, in which he retweets someone basically telling the Jews, not today Jews, that we will no longer, CNN implicated USSR is to blame, not anymore Jews, not anymore. Here's General Flynn retweeting someone saying, not anymore Jews, not anymore. The corrupt Democratic machine will do and say anything to get Never Hillary into power. This is a new low. I mean, can you imagine if that was something that one of your colleagues had retweeted just in the last year?
I can't imagine it. Now, I think in fairness to General Flynn, he retracted that, said it was a mistake, that he didn't mean to send that tweet. But nonetheless, there are a lot of very offensive tweets that he did mean to send, that he hasn't retracted.
Like fear of Muslims is rational? Is that
exactly?
Do you think that's a legitimate view for the national security advisor of this country to hold?
Absolutely not. And I think, just as the president laid out in his speech today, suggesting that all Muslims or that an entire faith is linked to terror or is somehow anathema or ought to be the subject of a registry. All of these terrible, bigoted ideas are so counterproductive as well in terms of the fight against terror, because they play into the ISIS and al-Qaeda narrative that the West is at war with all of Islam. It's deeply destructive. And imagine trying to our Muslim allies and get their support when we're talking about banning Muslims from coming to our country. So what are we supposed to say to King Abdullah of Jordan? Right. We'll work with you, but just don't try to come to the United States?
Congressman Adam Schiff, always a pleasure.